The following program is provided by Montgomery Community Media, a nonprofit organization helping Montgomery County residents and their communities create and share local media content. Please visit mymcmedia.org for more information about MCM.
Welcome to the Montgomery Community Media Forum for candidates running for the office of County Executive. I'm Chris Gordon, founder of chrisgordonnews.com, pleased to be asked by MCM to serve as the moderator of this forum. Now, in the next 90 minutes, you'll hear from 5 candidates seeking your vote for County Executive in the upcoming Maryland primary on July 19th. So let's meet the candidates. Peter James is the executive of a technology company. He ran twice as a Republican candidate for Congress and says he registered as a Democrat to reach the most people for this election. He lives in Gaithersburg. Now, there are 2 Republicans running for county executive. Shelley Skolnick informed us that he's not available to participate in this forum. Skolnick is a lawyer from Chevy Chase who has previously run for the office of county executive. His opponent in the GOP primary is Reardon Sullivan, the chairman of the county's Republican Central Committee. He's the founder and owner of a successful 40-person engineering consulting company in Montgomery County. He lives in Gaithersburg. Turning to the Democrats, Hans Riemer has served on the Montgomery County Council since 2010. He lives in Tacoma Park with his wife and 2 sons. David Blair narrowly lost to our current county executive 4 years ago in the primary. He is a leader of a nonprofit organization and a healthcare business executive. He calls Potomac home. Marc Elrich is the sitting county executive seeking re-election as Montgomery County Executive, the office to which he was elected in 2018. Prior to that, Mr. Elrich served on the county council beginning in 2006. He lives in Tacoma Park. And finally, Green Party candidate Devin Batley of Durwood is running only in the general election, so he'll not be looking for your vote in the upcoming primary. And now on to the rules. The candidates will be given 2 minutes to answer each question. They're allowed to request a 1-minute rebuttal if they believe their position has been mischaracterized by another candidate. Now, as you all know, Montgomery County is a great place to live. It's been my home since 1976. And as these statistics show, many residents experience great success here. But any good place can always be better, and that's what we're here to talk about. Our county spends more on our students than most other areas in the country. And there are more resources for every child. But while that may be comforting to parents, one of the issues dominating the news recently is alarming: mass shootings. They've created a fear for our school children, parents, and teachers. A quick look at the headlines appearing on MyMCM's website point to the areas of concern for everyone who attends and work in our county's school system: shootings, ghost guns. So our first question to the candidates is this: what can you do as county executive to help assure the safety of our children in school? We start alphabetically. Mr. Blair.
Well, thank you for tuning in. So as your county executive, job one has to be keeping you and your family safe. And unfortunately and tragically, we live in a country where individuals can buy ghost guns online. They can go to a gun show and buy a military-style weapon. So we have to do everything at the local level to keep you and your families and your children safe. The question is about schools. So school resource officers were put in place to prevent violent crimes. I know when I used to drop my daughter off at high school several years ago, it was reassuring knowing that there was a police officer there. It happened to be one of those years where there was many shootings across the country. So I believe we can do that in a healthy way to keep our children safe. But equally important, it's important to make sure that the children feel respected. And in no way were those school resource officers meant to enforce minor infractions or over-police our black and brown students. But I believe we can have it both ways, right? We have 26 high schools in Montgomery County. If it wasn't working in a few, let's fix it, right? So that our children are safe. The analogy that I would share, we have dozens of health clinics across the county. And if a few of them weren't working, we wouldn't just close them all down. No, we would get to the root cause and fix them, because I absolutely believe that we can keep our children safe and they can feel respected at the same time.
Mr. Elrich, you're next.
Yeah. I wish we had dozens of mental health clinics across the county. The county's done a number of things. When myself and the council last year looked at this issue, we wound up with a proposal that met the state standard for what we needed to do, which is keep the officers close to the schools, but they didn't have to be in the schools. They could check in with the schools. They were intended to be involved when there were police issues and issues that would actually be criminal. One of the problems that had happened with the SRO program was that 97% of what the police were used for were enforcement of school discipline rather than dealing with criminal activities. And that had created a great deal of angst, and I'll say anger, among both students and some of their parents. And that's why we looked to change the system. We also planned on putting in 2 social workers per high school, because I think everybody agrees these kids need, more than anything, more mental health supports than anything else. The school system tried, but could not hire the mental health care workers that they had planned on hiring. And not being able to hire them, along with the rising number of incidents in the school, led the school system to request that we modify the program. And I agreed to the modification. The superintendent, Dr. McKnight, came up with the proposal was that the officers would be in school, they would be in the building, but they would not patrol halls, and they would not, under any circumstances, enforce school discipline. With those parameters, I was comfortable with that for the rest of this year, and we'll talk about what happens when we see if they're able to hire the complement of social workers that they need. But I believe that we need the ability to respond to crime promptly and be able to deal with issues as they arise, but we also need to deal with the underlying mental health issues that many of the students are presenting, and COVID has made ever so much worse.
Peter James, you are next on school safety.
Yes, I do think having uniformed officers in schools a little chilling. By looking at the numbers, there's probably a lot more incidents that occur outside the school. I think we need to look a lot of the things that are affecting what's happening to society. We used to have open gyms when I was growing up in the county, and having more activities, having a mentorship of adults to give good role models. Maybe we see kids going, latchkey kids, basically getting involved with friends at homes where there's not parents, and they get into these activities like buying ghost guns and that sort of thing. I think maybe the size of our school system has a detrimental effect on the pecking order that goes on. So I'd like to look at different models like Montessori schools, where there's a smaller group of students that don't have, essentially we have small towns, our high schools are 2,000 students. So I think reducing the size of the school. I definitely want to have police officers stations close to the school and a quick response that's well trained. I think we can also cross-train some of the staff in the school. There's AI apps now. If you go to Ginger.io and look at that, that's a way students can monitor their mental health and actually maybe use similar things to have the students sort of more aware of what they're doing as far as ostracizing certain students.
Thank you, Mr. James. Hans Riemer.
Well, thank you for the question. My wife Angela and I have 2 sons. They're 14 and 11, so we've got a rising high school student and a rising middle schooler. And I feel this issue very personally. In fact, I'm the only candidate in the race with kids in the schools. My oldest son will be going to a high school where there was a violent incident, and we've seen a proliferation of ghost guns, and we have to acknowledge that until we deal with this massive proliferation of weapons, there's going to be serious safety issues. However, I think we have to focus on violence prevention in our schools, and I've been volunteering with a group of parents. We go into my son's middle school, and we're just a friendly adult presence, not supervising, not enforcing rules, being there, talking, mentoring, helping kids see that there are supportive adults around them. To me, that's a good metaphor. We need better trained teachers and administrators. We need coaches. We need youth sports. Our kids are experiencing a crisis. We've been through a terrible time with COVID. They're stressed out. They're feeling very anxious about the world, and the adults that they see in the world are behaving poorly as well. And we need to meet this moment with a much bigger effort to make them safe. As I said, more youth sports, more social workers. The council has added significant funds for violence prevention teams in all of our high schools. But let's engage our kids in safety campaigns. We need to talk to them about sharing information with a trusted adult, because the kids know what's going on. When there's two kids who have a conflict that's going to brew into something significant, there are other kids that know, and we need our children to feel safe to share that information. That's the way we're really going to stop violence from occurring in our schools. And as your county executive, I'm going to put more investments in place and build a stronger safety campaign and a culture of safety with children, students, families, and all the professionals in our school buildings.
We've heard from the 4 Democrats. Now we turn to Republican. Mr. Sullivan, Reardon Sullivan.
Thank you for the question. I want to make sure that everybody understands how important school resource officers are in our schools. The school resource officers not only are in the schools as a leader and as a figure, they also develop relationships with the students that, as Hans was saying, can help head things off at the pass. There's been many stories where, because a student confided in a school resource officer, that things have been avoided. The importance of school resource officers was also brought to bear by the principals. There was a Zoom meeting a couple years ago where they had all of the principals in some of the local schools say that they wanted school resource officers in our schools. Unfortunately, the county council said, no, we're going to take school resource officers out of the schools. And that was, as I think we all see now, was truly a mistake. I think that we need to make sure that the gun laws that are on the books, that we accurately enforce them. As we all know, we have ghost guns are now illegal in Maryland. Having a gun that has a serial number taken off of it, that's illegal in Maryland. We need to enforce the laws that are there. And to help enforce those laws, we need to make sure that the police are properly funded, that they're properly trained, and that the men and women of law enforcement get the respect that they deserve.
Well, that point leads us directly into our next issue, the rise in crime in Montgomery County. There were 35 homicides reported just last year. That's the most in decades. Now, according to the website Crimes Grade, which rates communities around the U.S., there's a crime committed every 30 minutes in Montgomery County, every 30 minutes. And these crimes are getting more violent. There are more carjackings, more armed robberies, more murders in the past 2 years. Yet the size of our police force has declined due to cuts, retirement, and recruiting difficulties. So we asked the candidates, what's your plan to reduce crime? And as I've already told them, my wife, who listens closely to political debates, always says, how are you going to do it, and how are you going to pay for it? Mr. Elrich, we'll start with you.
Well, I would have started 2 years ago when I sent over to the council a proposal to raise police pay. We knew at the time that morale was a major issue, that we were losing officers, we were having difficulty filling recruit classes, and that officers were especially concerned about the comparison of Montgomery County pay to other jurisdictions. And we were, if not the worst, close to the worst paid jurisdiction in the county. The council then decided that it wasn't fiscally prudent to fund that contract, and it didn't get funded. This year, we renegotiated. This was the year in the cycle where we negotiated with the police union, and we put together another package, and this year the council passed the package. It's a good thing, but it probably hurt us for a couple of years where it might have been an easier time recruiting police officers into the county. We've worked hard to make sure that the department is more balanced and that the practices they engage in are less confrontational and less inflammatory in the community. That's an important part. It's an important part of building trust between the community and policing. I think we know it's something we learned with the immigrant community, that the trust that the police were able to build with the immigrant community has often led the immigrant community to actually cooperate with the police instead of avoid the police. And that's something we need to think about as we move forward with other programs. We're going through a retraining of the police. It's going to be substantial. The state has set some very clear parameters. We've set even clearer parameters on things where the state's not clear enough. And we expect to see, reforms going into place. It is going to take a while to train people who for many years were trained to be on a kind of warrior mentality to a guardian mentality. And I will say it's not just the officers, it's endemic in the department, because even the leadership of the department were once officers. Everybody did the same things, and now that it's very clear we don't want them doing those things, we have to make sure that it goes from top to bottom. It's not just to blame the officers, but to recognize how often things people do are what they're actually trained to do.
All right, we turn to Peter James.
Yes, I would like to see us look at different ways of doing policing. If we look to England, they have only about 10% of their officers carry guns, and they have a staged approach when they interact with the public. We also see, I know you've all seen incidents where there's like 20 cops on the scene. It seems that we need to maybe have a better system for deploying police officers to match the need for each individual incident. I was out eating in Silver Spring, and there was an elderly woman that had some kind of conflict, and there was 4 officers with guns that showed up. So we can have officers that are engaged, put them in the streets, on the streets, maybe some bike patrols, as opposed to keeping them in cars, so they get to start to know, and keep them deployed in smaller areas so they actually become part of the community. And I think that will have a big effect. We also need to look at the prevention and understand what are the drivers. We used to have a conservation corps in Montgomery County, and I worked with the kids. And these are the first-time offenders that the judge put into the program, so they didn't go to jail and become trained on how to become a professional criminal. So there's programs we can do that, and they're very cost-effective. And I'd like to see our kids really understand what the drivers are. If kids are getting further behind in school, they don't see any way out other than a life of crime, or an opportunity if they haven't eaten that day, or their family is struggling financially. I'd like to address those issues, and the way we can pay for it is to save $9 billion on transit boondoggles. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll have to hear more about that later. Mr. Riemer, you have been quoted lately as saying you don't feel as comfortable and safe in Silver Spring as you once did.
Well, and I think families in Germantown will relate to this as well. It wasn't long ago I took my youngest son for a movie and ice cream in downtown Silver Spring. And we were sitting on Ellsworth, and it was the first time in about 15 years, it was about 9 o'clock, 9:30, that I have ever not felt safe in downtown Silver Spring. And in fact, there had been a drive-by shooting several days prior. And I felt very strongly at the time and that the executive branch was not assertive enough in managing the situation in downtown Silver Spring. So I understand that feeling safe is at the core of what makes Montgomery County a great place to live. It's what we love, is safety in schools. But I also think about this issue in more complex ways. My oldest son, he loves to go to downtown Silver Spring with his friends. And we want to know that he's safe from crime. We also want to know that just because he's a teenager wearing a hood and he's black, that he's not going to end up in a dangerous situation, someone accusing him of doing something, or perhaps even having a bad interaction with police. So I think we need safety and reform. And the answer here is in changing who we recruit. We're in a crisis with policing. The reason why people are not signing up for our police department or other police departments is because of the crisis that we've all seen in the media. And until we solve those problems, I am afraid that this is not going to improve. So being active in a reform agenda is being pro-police. We need these things to go together. We've got to recruit more young local people to be officers and more women to be police officers. We've got to change the rules by which they do their work. And we need an executive who's going to back the management of our department, because it's proven, it's a fact that great management in departments solves crime. But we also need prevention. We've got to have more youth sports. We've got to have things for kids to do in these terrible, stressful times. We need an outlet for our young people, because when they don't have it, they get into trouble.
All right, let's turn to the Republican on the panel, Reardon Sullivan.
Thank you for the question. Great question. I want to be clear, part of my platform is to make sure that we properly fund the police. When we don't fund the police, as some people are doing right now, we end up with more carjackings, we end up with more violent crime. The statistics show that. Right now, if you look at the budget that's actually been published, it actually shows a reduction of $3 million on police patrol and actually a loss of 53 FTEs. So anyone who's saying we want to have more police protection, and they're on the county council and county executive, but yet they're cutting the police, they are actually defunding the police. I believe that we need to make sure that the pay for the police is what it needs to be. Right now, the starting salary, I believe, is about $56,000. That equates to about $26 an hour. So we're asking people to put their lives on the line for $26,000. They can go down and work for the Capitol Police and make $72,000 starting. I think the morale of the police, part of that comes from the top. If you're working for an organization that doesn't truly appreciate you and doesn't value you, you're not going to want to be there, you're not going to want to stay, and I think that has something to do with the lag in recruitment. Also, the accountability boards. There's accountability boards that that Montgomery County has put in play. I think if you're going to have the police being judged, it needs to be judged by a member of the police union or an active police officer. We can't have the police being judged on these accountability boards and accountability councils by people who have not actually done a citizens advisory ride along or are not really familiar with policing.
Thank you very much. And we conclude with David Blair, then we'll have time for rebuttal.
So violent crimes are up, as you saw, across the county. The good news is we have a chief of police in Chief Marcus Jones that knows how to address this, but he needs the proper funding and he needs the support to make it happen. And so a year ago when we cut close to 30 positions from the police force, that was clearly concerning. So we need to restore those cuts, but also we need to support him and his team. And as I've been campaigning over the past year and literally trying to go to every organization and department that I can, and I meet with the police officers, they're literally looking at their shoes. They feel demoralized. And you hear things like, David, we're tired of being the political football, right? And so there's no reason or no doubt why early retirements are up and there's resignations and we're having a difficult time recruiting. So our police need to know that we're going to support all good police officers. But let's also look at the longer term problem here, right? Because we know that crime stems from a lack of opportunity for education and economic opportunities. This month, right, there'll be about 12,000 high school students in Montgomery County completing their senior year. 3,000 roughly will not be able to pass their entrance exams into the University of Maryland systems, nor have we trained them in a career, right? So basically they're going to be leaving high school and they're going to be destined to minimum wage jobs. That's unacceptable. And we can be investing in career and tech programs much earlier. So if they're not going to college, they can get out. And it's interesting, as you run for county executive, you go across the county, and on one hand, you see how employers are desperate for talent, whether that's healthcare, technology, trades, good paying jobs. But on the other hand, I'm with the nonprofit community saying, David, we need good paying jobs. And I think the county executive can connect those dots and address crime from a long-term perspective.
Well, we're starting to engage. We're starting to define the differences. We're starting to perhaps blame. So I've already caught the eye, or county executive caught the eye of me, and so did Mr. Riemer, Councilman Riemer. Mr. County Executive, the first response for 1 minute rebuttal.
So a couple of things. I think in the community, it's hard for people to understand why regular citizens go in front of a jury, of their peers, of citizens, and police should only go in front of police. I mean, that to many people creates a conflict, and I tend to agree with them. I do think that it's just wrong to assert that management is the sole solution to this. Management nowhere in the country has ever led police reform, and it did not lead it here. And the truth is that the union here is more amenable to things than their comparable union in other parts of the country. And they've done things that I really appreciate, like negotiating the duty to intervene, and also coming to me and telling me about the orders from management to do protectual stops, orders from management to enforce marijuana laws on kids unnecessarily. This is the police union saying, we don't want to be doing these things. We would prefer to be doing policing, not getting involved in this level of activity in the community. So I don't blame anybody who's come through the system, but collective experience is problematic.
All right. When you said management, you blame management. Were you blaming Mr. Elrich or the police chief for a lack of management, supervision? Mr. Blair, Mr. Sullivan, you seem to.
Who do you address the question to?
Who blamed management for the problems with the police department? That's what he just answered. Did you feel somebody mischaracterized you? No. Okay.
I think that was a reference to my comment, actually.
All right. Well, that's it.
But, well, first of all, I want to set aside this notion that Montgomery County has in any way defunded the police. If you look at our county budget in 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22, what you'll see is the county budget for the police department has grown every year. There were some jurisdictions that said, oh, we're going to literally cut funding out of the police department. That did not happen in Montgomery County. We also have a major issue with vacancies. And so the police department recommended a way to reorganize the department and to better use our police staff. And that's what those positions were about. And who wouldn't want your department to figure out how to deal with a lack of recruitment and vacant positions? And that's a problem that's going to get worse. When I talk about supporting the management, I'm talking about making sure that we have incentives so that the best officers want to be managers. And the county executive has decreased the pay differential between management and the rank and file because he always supports the union. And the union is an impediment to change. And we need to tackle that.
All right. Well, wait a second. Okay, yes.
I'd like to rebut the thing about the accountability board and what I call the chicken garden and hen house idea. I believe we should have an elected police commission, and sure, we can mandate that they do some ride-alongs to get to know what it's like. But to have truly accountability, we need a board that even has the power to discipline and even fire under the merit system. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, Mr. Riemer, when you are saying that management could be better, are you saying that, who are you talking
yes, thank
about?
you. There was a fact there. So there is research that shows that the length of time that your managers are in their position in the police department shows up very directly in your success in reducing crime.
Okay, are you blaming the police chief or the county executive or managers generally?
What I'm saying is the county executive in his compensation recommendations for the department has reduced the incentive to be a manager by not increasing management pay at the same rate as rank and file pay. And the county executive does not back management in its disputes with the union over policy and management issues. And that is an issue. We need an executive who's going to support a well-run department, and the union has been an impediment to making the changes that we need to make.
If you would like a rebuttal, you certainly just can have.
So policy and management issues are two different things. Policy issues, I think that this we look to leadership for in terms of what the department's going to do. How the department manages people and whether or not people feel they're fairly managed is legitimate reasons to look at how it's been done. And I don't always think the department's been fair to its employees. As far as the pay gap goes, just because you raise salaries at the bottom doesn't mean you're supposed to raise them at the top. We were looking for fair salaries for the right job in the right place. Montgomery County's pay is pretty comparable in the upper ranks. Our pay is not comparable in the lower ranks. We will go broke if every time you raise people at the bottom, I've got to raise people at the top. It's not a sustainable economic model.
It's a good segue to go to our Next issue, economic development. Business growth means more jobs and more companies paying taxes. And that guarantees more of the services that Montgomery County residents have come to expect. But for years, we have heard complaints that Montgomery County is not business friendly. If you haven't heard it, you're hearing it now. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the D.C. region has added more than 94,000 jobs, while Montgomery County has lost more than 20,000 jobs in that same period between 2007 and 2020. And while the number of businesses has grown by 25,000 in D.C., Northern Virginia, and neighboring Maryland counties, Montgomery County has lost 669 businesses. So we turn to our candidates saying, what is your plan to turn this trend around? Mr. James, we start with you.
Yes, it's been shown that 85% of the new job creation comes from small businesses. And I think I've heard in enough of these forums, there's a focus on attracting large Fortune 500 companies. The Amazon negotiation and offer was so much redacted you couldn't figure out. But I think I'm a small businessman in the county, and I do sense like I'm the enemy when I try to do business with the county. I believe we can have, I would like to go out and get those unicorns. We have up to 30% vacancy in Silver Spring in their office buildings there. We can go out and attract the bleeding edge companies that are startup companies that are set to grow by leaps and bounds and offer them an opportunity here in an opportunity zone where if they go out and make $1 billion in 10 years, then they get that tax free. And that's a big carrot. So rather than trying to court developers and headquarter type deals, I would look at promoting the small business. We are trying to win a race, and we're putting we've got a two-legged racehorse. We're focused on the biotech and on the hospitality industry. We need to open it up to some of these bleeding edge industries like AI, quantum computing. So I would bring those technologies. The reason why businesses are moving to Northern Virginia is because they had the foresight of putting May West, which is a hub for the internet. So if we started with doing a hub for quantum computing, we could actually build an economic powerhouse. And also, rather than fixing the climate change, we can get green companies here and export that technology.
Hans Riemer.
Well, as a parent of 2 kids, I want my kids to have a future in this county, and I want all of our kids to have a future in this county. And what do they need for that to be possible? They need great career options, and they need housing that they can afford. Montgomery County is not producing enough great private sector careers or affordable housing. And so that's a really big problem, and we need to turn it around. What's the answer? There are many answers, but let's start with transportation. We have got to have a stronger connection to Virginia. Our county executive has been fighting against a practical solution to expand the American Legion Bridge and fix 270. We've got to have a better connection with our research universities and our federal labs. The University of Maryland is right next to Montgomery County, but it's not integrated enough into our economy. The county executive proposed single tracking the Purple Line, which has 4 stops on the University of Maryland campus, connects Silver Spring and Bethesda. We need to redevelop the Red Line corridor, all up and down. We need more Bethesdas, walkable city centers, up and down Rockville Pike. County executive has supported moratoriums over new development on Rockville Pike. We need to rebuild the Purple Line, or build the Purple Line corridor as an economic engine. Make it affordable, walkable, and a place where technology companies in quantum or more life science companies would want to be. County executive proposed single tracking the Purple Line into downtown Bethesda. We need more affordable housing. Companies can't grow here if they can't hire here because their workers can't afford to live here. We need a pro-housing county executive. That is one of the most important things we need to have. And we don't have that today. We have the opposite of that. We have a county executive who has been fighting against new housing at every turn. So the good news is We have life sciences growing. We have an opportunity now to get a locomotive that'll pull our train. But we got to get it right. We got to get all those things right. And if we do, we're going to win. But if we don't, if we blow it, it's more to climb.
We turn to Reardon Sullivan now.
I think it's a great question. I think to grow Montgomery County, we need to bring jobs here. We need to bring good paying jobs. That's the only way that we're going to increase our tax base and really grow the county. I think we need to look at both large businesses and small businesses, whether it be a unicorn company that Peter was talking about, or some of the larger companies that have unfortunately gone to Northern Virginia, whether it be Northrop Grumman, whether it be Clark Construction, which was a $4 billion company. I think we need to work towards getting all the possible companies here in Montgomery County. How do we do that? I think we need to change, I think the term you used, Chris, was business friendly. We need to make sure that if somebody's going to build something here, that they can get it through the permit office very easily. As a person who actually does that on a daily basis, there's a lot of possible improvement there. I think that we need to make sure we don't impose unnecessary regulations, such as the county council is now looking at various, I'll say, green initiatives, which are over and above what is being required in other jurisdictions. If you're a business and you say, do I want to go to Montgomery County, or do I want to go to someplace where I can more easily get the work done? I want to, where they're going to go to someplace where they can get the work done. I think we also need to focus on the very basics, such as things we talked about before, public safety. We need to make sure that if you're going to relocate your business here, that you and your workers feel safe. I think we need to work on our education system. Currently, we have schools like Watkins Mill High School, which is graduating 81% of their students, but only 3% are proficient in math per the U.S. News and World Report. So I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think it really starts at the top. You have to have a county executive that's going to have a pro-business attitude, and that's one of the things I want to bring to Montgomery County.
David Blair.
So Chris, I think this actually gets to your wife's question. How are you going to pay for things, right? Because in Montgomery County, we want the best schools, we want affordable housing, we want great transit solutions. Well, that costs money, and that money comes from a flourishing business environment. And not to bore you with too many statistics, but this is shocking. Over the last 10 years, $5.2 billion is the net tax migration. Meaning if you add up the W-2s of people that came in and you subtracted the W-2s that left, we have a huge deficit. That's your tax base, and we need that to pay for all the priorities that we so value in Montgomery County. Now, it's interesting. When I started a business in Montgomery County 25 years ago, I didn't have a perspective of whether it was easy or difficult to do business in Montgomery County. But only later, when we grew to a Fortune 500 company, we had offices in 30 states and thousands of employees, I started to realize, wow, Montgomery County is the most challenging place to do business. And I'm not exaggerating. And it wasn't one thing, it's everything. And so over the last 10 years since we sold that business, I put more effort into figuring out how are we going to get this economy going. And I've met with hundreds of business leaders, chamber leaders, government officials to understand what we can do to get this economy going. It's why I developed a business bill of rights. So things that we're going to offer to our businesses around permits, inspections, procurement, making sure that we have adequate access to talent, that we're training people the right ways. I believe we can leverage what we have. The small business community that we have in Montgomery County is phenomenal, but they could use better support. We need to make sure they have access to capital so they can grow their businesses. We also have this wonderful entrepreneurial spirit in Montgomery County. 1 out of 3 of our residents was born outside the United States. Think how entrepreneurial that is, right? They had to learn a new system, a new culture, maybe a new language, and yet we're lagging the region in new business growth. I'm going to harness that entrepreneurial spirit, reverse those trends so that we can pay for our priorities.
And Mr. Elrich.
So when I came into office, I focused on economic development, and there were a couple of things that we could address very quickly, which was Sidney Katz and I did a listening tour. We asked people why they thought Montgomery County was the worst place to do business, and asked them what they thought we needed to change. All the managers had to go to those meetings, and as a result, people began changing the permitting department and also began changing procurement, because we wanted to make sure that Montgomery County businesses had greater opportunities to do business in the county. We put in place business teams that were going to be attached to all of the community centers in the county in order to provide local business support that they weren't getting, from the Economic Development Corporation. But the bigger picture is why don't people come here? And this is the puzzle. When I came into office, and before when I was on the council, we had 10 million square feet of vacant office space, 5 million Class A, 5 million Class B. We have the lowest taxes on development by far than any jurisdiction in the DC region. And if you have lower taxes and you have massive vacancy and you're not getting jobs, you got to think about what is the problem. And the council's solution, both things I voted against, which, by the way, didn't keep them from going into effect, the focus solely on density. The idea that if you give developers more density, you would get jobs and housing. That was Hans's mantra. We never got the jobs in housing. He's running a campaign now that there are no jobs in housing. He spent 10 years on the council, being the architect of policies that produce nothing. So we need to take a different focus on things. And one of the things that I've talked about is changing the way we do taxes in Montgomery County. We have one tax of all taxes, which is the impact tax, which unfortunately, though it doesn't make us more taxed than Virginia, it's a tax that actually changes the cost of construction. And I want to change that. I've offered, and I've met with the business community about doing this. A lot of people would be more than happy to swap our system for Virginia's system, which is what I'm proposing.
Does anyone request rebuttal time?
Well, thank you so much. The county executive's comments there I find baffling. Let's look downtown Bethesda. What do you see in downtown Bethesda? First of all, there's a master plan that we passed in 2016. County executive voted against it, even though we worked with the community and we got consensus around that plan, and it's going to produce all kinds of great community benefits like parks and other things. Downtown Bethesda is humming. If you go there on a weekday, there are people walking around everywhere. New companies have come into Montgomery County, and they have landed in the commercial office space that we have built in downtown Bethesda. There are nearly 2,000 new housing units in downtown Bethesda, including hundreds of affordable housing units. So the assertion that this doesn't work is simply false. Now, I know the construction is painful, and we're going to get through it, but Bethesda's going to be amazing. To have a county executive who looks at everything that's happening there and says that it doesn't see any value there, that tells you a lot about his vision for the future of our county. We need an executive who's going to face forward.
Any other rebuttals?
Of course, I never said I don't see any value there, but I see a problem there. The big problem is there's no affordable housing. We get 15%. We get criticized for not building enough affordable housing. County policy is you get 15% of market rate units. So if you build 2,000 units, you get 300 affordable units. Let's put it in the context. Park and Planning says we'll lose 11,000 units by 2030. There are 50,000 people today living in Montgomery County who are paying 60% of their income and cannot find affordable housing. And the county has lost over 20,000 affordable housing units since 2000. 300 units is like dropping a grain of sand at the beach and saying, can you tell the difference? We have no meaningful we have no meaningful policies that will produce additional housing, particularly affordable housing.
Well, let's call halftime right now and pick it up here. We thank all of our candidates. Going to take a quick break. And there's a lot more to talk about, like affordable housing. Why is Montgomery County falling behind and failing in providing housing for middle and lower income families and kids who are just getting their first job and want a place to live? And the daily commute. It eats hours out of every commuter in Montgomery County. Ahead, how these candidates plan to relieve traffic gridlock. We'll ask these county executive candidates about that and more when we return.
If you are a U.S. citizen, a Maryland resident, and at least 16 years old, you can register to vote. Register online by going to the Montgomery County Board of Elections website at 777vote.org. Or text the word VOTE to 77788. Then you can fill out the online voter registration form if you have a Maryland driver's license, learner's permit, or ID. If you don't have one of those, don't fret. Simply print out the voter registration application and mail it to the Montgomery County Board of Elections. Remember, the deadline to register to vote for the 2022 gubernatorial primary election is Tuesday, June 28th. You can also register and vote during early voting or on Election Day. Bring a document that proves where you live, like a Maryland-issued driver's license, ID card, paycheck, bank statement, utility bill, or other government document with you to register and vote. Any Montgomery County registered voter may request to vote by mail. You do not need to provide a reason for doing so. If you have a Maryland driver's license, learner's permit, or ID, you can apply online to request to vote by mail by texting the letters VBM to 77788 or by visiting the Board of Elections website at 777vote.org. If you don't have one of those, don't worry. You may submit the vote-by-mail application that was mailed to all voters, or you can submit a new application at 777vote.org. Ballots must be returned in person, deposited into a ballot drop box, or postmarked and mailed by Election Day. Plan ahead and request your ballot in advance. You must choose between requesting a ballot by mail or voting in person. If you request to vote by mail ballot but change your mind and decide to vote in person, you will experience delays in voting and getting your ballot counted. So plan ahead for how you want to vote.
Hello, I'm Ulysses Z. Campbell, board member here at Montgomery Community Media. Today, more than ever, community media has a role to play in enriching our lives and neighborhoods, creating connections between us, and teaching us to use existing technology more effectively. Community media centers are places where you can learn to become media literate. You can learn about podcasting, video production, broadcasting, and much more. You can make new friends, network with fellow creatives, and expand your range of contacts. And it's all right there in your neighborhood. The Access Center in your area is Montgomery Community Media. Make it your business to learn about them today. Please join me in supporting Montgomery Community Media by going to mymcmedia.org/donate. You'll be glad you did.
Welcome back to the Montgomery Community Media Forum for the County Executive candidates. Now, one of the issues, and there are so many that are intertwined, one of the issues that impacts almost all Montgomery County residents is traffic, backups on the Beltway, gridlock on Rockville Pike, and so many other commuter corridors. According to the website Best Places to Live, our commute time is way above the national average. Mass transit helps some, but since the pandemic, more and more people are choosing to ride in their own virus-free surroundings of their cars to commute, and ridership has yet to return to pre-pandemic proportions. Well, there's been a lot of talk about solutions, the Purple Line, bus rapid transit, and widening roadways. So the question, can you offer anything more than talk? Mr. Riemer, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you started with me because this is an area where I've been working really hard and I think delivering results for our community. First of all, there are many different transportation systems in the county and they all need to be functioning optimally. Let's start with our roads. A year ago, I worked with our governor to help move forward on a very controversial project. I recognize that it's controversial and I don't think we can let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We have to expand capacity on the American Legion Bridge and on 270. I don't support widening the Beltway, but we need to have a functioning system to get across the bridge. It's not even only a local priority, it's a national priority. You've got to be able to get to the #1 economy in the region, or Montgomery County is going to wither on the vine. So I have been helping us move forward on that project while our executive has been obstructing. On Metro, we need Metro to be back to full service. We need the state to continue to invest in Metro so that the trains run more frequently, so that they're safe, and so our riders will come back. We've got to have a great Purple Line. The Purple Line is one of the most important transportation opportunities for our county. And we have an executive who has obstructed and even proposed single tracking, diminishing the number of trains that could service that line. We need to make walking and biking real transportation choices so that people will feel safe walking to the bus or walking from the Metro to their job. And we have not had enough emphasis on safety in Montgomery County. It's been a big priority for me. I've added significant funding in our capital budget for it, and as county executive, I'm going to keep that up. And there are some long-term opportunities we got to move forward on, like the Red Line to Germantown. We need to extend it to Germantown. MARC train should be a real commuter rail like what you see in the Northeast. So we've got to get going on the long term and on the short term on systems big and small. And when we do that, then we'll be in a much stronger position.
There are two Republican candidates, as I mentioned earlier. Shelley Skolnick could not be with us. We turn to Mr. Sullivan, the other Republican candidate, Reardon Sullivan.
So I'm the other Republican candidate.
Well, the Republican candidate who's on our panel.
Oh, there you go. How's that? There you go. Transportation is the bane to a lot of us who live here in Montgomery County. There's big ticket items and smaller items. Some of the smaller items might be getting White's Ferry open. I think we need to work together with Virginia to get White's Ferry open. I think we need to we need to build M83. We need another north-south corridor or pathway between Up County and Lower County. I believe we also need to take the money that the state is offering us and improve 270. I actually agree with Hans that we need to fix the American Legion Bridge, because that is the bottleneck. Once we increase the throughput on all those the northern roads, we really need to make the American Legion Bridge more usable. We need to consider selling bonds to make 270 wider above the ICC. And again, in the Purple Line, I think the Purple Line is really an opportunity. It's in play. We need to get through the contract issues and contract negotiations and get that rolling, because I do think that will open up a lot of transportation options throughout the county.
David Blair?
So traffic is horrible, and we've got to use every tool in the toolbox to address this. So if it's our roads, like fixing the bottleneck at American Legion Bridge has to get done. And if we think it's bad now, wait until Virginia's managed lanes. They've already started construction when they reach there. Mass transit, right? We got to get the Purple Line finished. We got to leverage the infrastructure that we have in place, because these are things where we can have an immediate impact, like our Ride-On bus. So ridership on Ride-On was down 25% in the 10 years up until the pandemic. So it dropped 25% before the pandemic. Right? So who was asleep at the switch when that happened, right? So we've got to be reimagining our bus routes. Other cities have done this, and they've seen ridership jump up. In Houston, they did this, and they saw ridership on the weekends jump something like 20% and close to 10% during the week. So not only reimagine bus routes, let's make bus fares free. And they're going to do a better job of leveraging technology so riders know when the bus is going to be there and whether there's availability. So we've got to leverage the infrastructure that we have in place. Even our existing roadways, we can make them more efficient. There's something called adaptive traffic signals. Now, this isn't a silver bullet. It's not going to fix all of our problems, but where there's roads, where they're not at capacity, they can make them more efficient. And so if we can do that, let's say like 355, a north-south corridor that's always congested. If we can make that more efficient, maybe we could put a dedicated lane in there for bus rapid transit, or a dedicated lane for bicycles and pedestrians. So I want to leverage the infrastructure we have in place while also looking for longer-term solutions, like having a MARC station at Shady Grove, right? Those are the types of things, expanding MARC service to have midday train rides. Those are the types of things that we need to do to address the congestion that we find ourselves in.
Mr. Elrich.
So I'm going to start with a couple of things. First is, Hans just lies repeatedly about the American Legion Bridge. I was the first person to say the governor needs to start at the American Legion Bridge. I said on the first week I was elected that if you can do this project, you start at the bridge, you see what it relieves, and then you work backward. No one does what the governor was proposing, which is start at the back of the backup and work your way toward the plug. And so I've supported this. I've applauded the governor for being willing to tackle it, but I've also criticized him for not going to the federal government, which has a boatload of money for infrastructure, and asking for the federal government for money before he dumps this on Montgomery County taxpayers and Montgomery County drivers who have to use the toll roads. get as much money out of the federal government as you possibly can. I supported the double reversibles on 270, which was county policy and what we had been asking for. I proposed an alternative solution to the state and what to deal with the western part of the Beltway that wasn't reversibles, but also didn't involve going into the neighborhoods, which Greg Slater told me was actually what the other two companies proposed doing. So I've been working to actually get solutions on there that are minimally expensive to the county and may not require even having a toll road, and rely partly on our federal partners, because this is only like a major road that connects two jurisdictions and is a through road for people going north-south. We proposed the bus rapid transit line, 14 years ago. It's a long time ago. The fact is that with the current county's taxing system, you can't pay for it. You have to be able to float bonds. It means you have to get additional revenues. Hans has been one of the people on the council who's lowered the impact taxes on developers, gets less money from development in order to provide infrastructure in the county. When you worsen the adequate public facilities ordinance, which is what triggers the moratoriums, when you let developers not build the transportation or the schools we need, then you don't get the schools you need, and you don't get the intersection improvements or road improvements or transit improvements that you need. I will continue to work on that. I'll work with the new council who wants to solve these problems and actually understands there has to be a balanced approach between not just the public paying for everything, but with developers who benefit from the investments to be willing to pay for it, like they do in Northern Virginia.
Our final speaker before the rebuttal will be Peter James.
Yes, I'm the guy that's going to fix our traffic. We have the second worst traffic congestion in the whole nation. If I drive down without traffic, it takes me about 40 minutes by car to get down to downtown Silver Spring. It takes me 3.5 hours by bus. When they put in the bus rapid transit, it's going to take me 3 hours and 15 minutes to get down there. Transit does not work in our county, particularly in the up county. And rather, you mentioned 3 different options. There's a 4th option. It's called personal rapid transit. And that will completely eliminate our traffic problem. Go to my website, pjames.us. You can get in one of them. There's a video. You can ride it around and see what they are. The advantage of personal rapid transit is a 4-foot wide lane on 270 would carry 5 lanes of traffic. And it's the $3 billion they want to spend on bus rapid transit, the 100 miles, we can build for $1 billion personal rapid transit. It goes point to point. It's faster than cars, probably twice as fast as a car, because you don't stop. You don't stop for a light, you don't stop for traffic. It's point to point, and you don't have to make transfers. So I can take a PRT, it can go off onto Veers Mill Road and then go off down Georgia Avenue, and I can get down to downtown Silver Spring from Gaithersburg in 20 minutes. Just recently, the richest guy in Asia bought a personal rapid transit system company. He did not buy an articulating bus company. He did not buy a light or heavy rail company. He understands what really works. You need someone who understands transportation. I can give you 100 hours of every year of time back that we spend in traffic right now, each and every one of us.
Do you have a price tag on that?
It's $1 billion for 100. It's about 10. The elevated's about 10 million per mile. If we put it on the Crescent Trail, it's about 200,000 a mile because it's that grade.
Okay. The rebuttal round, Mr. Riemer.
Thank you. Well, I live down county, and I know that a lot of folks down county struggle to understand why we need to focus on the 270 corridor and make it functional. Because that's not the commuter route that they use. But if you live up county, I think you know. And I've got a lot of friends in Clarksburg or Gaithersburg or Germantown. And they work in Northern Virginia. And they spend a lot of time getting there. County executive's comments, he would have you believe he actually supports doing something in that corridor. But when he had a chance to get to yes with the governor, he couldn't do it. Just the opposite. He led a rally to kill the project. He made a motion at the Regional Council of Governments and killed it. It was dead. That project was dead because it had been removed from the queue for air quality analysis, which is a requirement for federal funding. So it couldn't get federal funding. It was dead. So that is your county executive. He killed the governor's project to widen the American Legion Bridge and address 270.
Okay, Mr. Elrich.
Hans, you sold out the negotiations. You accepted what they put on the table and said, fine. So you saddle Montgomery County with the full cost of the American Legion Bridge, and the toll rate payers, your friends in Northern Virginia, are going to wind up paying for the toll lanes. You're going to pay for an exorbitant and unnecessary expansion of 270 that could be solved by 2 reversible lanes, which our traffic people said, which Greg Slater actually said, and this could be done all the way up to Frederick. You settled for a deal that stopped the project at the ICC and left all your friends north of the IC with no road. The company has no commitment to build north of the ICC. There is no plan to build north of the ICC. There's nothing on paper that says this will happen. And that's a major problem because we're bottled up by traffic that comes down from Frederick and from my friends who also live in Clarksburg and points north. And they're going to be in a living hell until they get down south of the ICC, where maybe if they're willing to pay $20 for a one-way trip, they can get relief from it. Otherwise, regular riders are stuck in a mess.
Okay. Now, I know we could go back and forth. Anybody else want in on this? If not, did you have an ox that was gored in this fight?
No. He's going to talk about PRT more.
Well, did you or not, Mr. James? In other words, this is rebuttal. Were you mischaracterized?
Well,
I don't believe you were.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
then,
fine.
so far, you're naming names and going back and forth. And while there's hate, we've got to be fair and balanced. So, sir, my apologies.
No, that's fine.
I mean to be very respectful.
Okay.
Having said that, Mr. Riemer.
Thank you. So first of all, the county's major priority with the governor's project was removing the beltway through Silver Spring because everybody agreed we didn't want that in this project. And guess what? The governor agreed. That was a big victory. Secondly, as far as getting this project north of 370, yes, that is going to happen, and it does need to happen at the same time. That's called phase 2. That's how the project works. It's one phase at a time. And the county does still have the opportunity to have it be continuous construction. So that is ahead of us, and we can get that done. And I do think reversible lanes will work north of 370. I absolutely think that's a good idea. But it didn't work south. And we had a choice, either a functional project moving forward or not. And I supported moving forward. County executive supported obstruction.
Okay. You were both on council together. You were both colleagues. And now it appears this will be the last rebuttal.
Yeah. I just want my last rebuttal on this. There is no guarantee in what was signed that anything happens north. It's just a fact. It's not there. And so we're stranded, and we're going to have another governor, and you have to hope the next governor is willing to do something north of 270. Reversible lanes actually work all the way to the western spur of the Beltway. You don't need to widen anything until you get to the western spur. On the 270 as it is, you could paint in another lane tomorrow, which is what I suggested to the state. They've already taken between Falls Road and the spur, the curb lane, the inside lane next to the barrier. They could have done that all the way up and gained a lane overnight just by paint, just like they did in the southern part. And the same is true coming from Frederick down to the ICC. So they could get a lane at very low expense. His goal and their goal was to make this thing as painful as possible so people didn't see any solution other than what they were proposing. And your proposal is going to saddle people with ridiculous tolls. That's what the studies say. And that means only people who've got a lot of money are going to be using that road, and the rest of the people are going to be stuck in these lanes that are miserable.
Well, there are a number of issues that are interrelated and we need to unpack. Montgomery County ranks among the most affluent communities in the United States. Now, increasingly, it seems like a tale of two communities, two counties, the haves in the East County versus the have-nots in the west part of the county. I'm sorry, I have that backwards. The haves in the western part of the county, the have-nots in the east part of the county. Well, the county takes pride in its diversity with a majority-minority population. But some of that minority, lower and middle income residents, face difficulty finding decent, affordable rental housing. And then, meanwhile, housing ownership in every age group has dropped from 1990 compared to 2019. Now, I've heard a figure cited by some of you in the candidates' debates and forums that the county needs some 30,000 affordable units immediately, but it's falling behind more and more every year. Mr. Sullivan, you get to answer the first time. What are you going to do about increasing affordable housing?
Well, actually, that's a great question. A lot of the things that people have been quoting, I believe, are based on a Council of Governments study from 2019. Now that was really pre-COVID, and I would offer that we need to relook at that. Why? Because we've learned that during COVID, people can and will work from home. We're going to have north of 30% of the people who used to go into the nice shiny office buildings are going to be working from home. I think it's especially true of some of the younger, more tech savvy job positions and people. What that means is people can work in Montgomery County from Frederick, from Pennsylvania, from different parts of the country. So what that means is you don't necessarily have to live in Montgomery County to work here. So I think we need to take a look at that so we can really determine what the real need here is in Montgomery County. I do believe, from what I've seen, there is an issue with affordable housing. I don't think that some of the plans, the Thrive 2050, is a plan which is I don't believe it's going to work. I think we have builders like EYA that have shown that the cost after they take a building down and rebuild up a quadruplex, those units are going to not be affordable, and they're not going to meet the goal that people really want to achieve. Also, they're going to displace established homes, the black and brown community that lived in these established homes. And I think that what we need to do is work towards building housing at various, like a metro stop, transit-oriented housing, so that we can have live, work, play zones where people can reach.
I just want to clarify, Thrive 2050 is the proposal for the master plan for Montgomery County. So if we use jargon, I just want to make sure our viewers are up to speed. Mr.
Absolutely.
Blair.
So I hope the viewers at home are starting to see trends. So we've talked about public safety, crime, jobs, traffic, and now housing. They're all going in the wrong direction. And so the elected leaders to my right, they've had decades to address these problems. I'm tired of waiting, right? These are actionable things that we could be doing. Other parts of the country are making meaningful progress, and we're not. It sounds a lot like, a county council meeting from 2012 or 2014 or 2016 to my right. And so as it relates to affordable housing, yes, we have a crisis that needs to be addressed, and it affects you, because this is our quality of life. We need nurses here. We need teachers, and they can't afford to live here. And if they can't afford to live here, eventually they say, I don't want to drive 45 minutes, and I'm going to work in Howard County or Frederick County or someplace else. I was actually with the CEO of Adventist Healthcare, big hospital system here in Montgomery County. Number one thing, so he has to hire 600 nurses in the next 2 years, he said. Number one thing was affordable housing. He needed housing. And so we say affordable housing, it could be workforce housing, any kind of housing we need here. We also have great opportunities in Montgomery County. We actually have parcels of land that we could be utilizing. So whether it's land near our metros, right, which would be a great place. It's where our 25-year-old son would love to live, right? Because where he could live in an apartment, go down the elevator, jump on the metro, go to his job. So those mixed income, mixed use developments, we could be building them around our metros. We also have county-owned land that we could be better taking advantage of. Because if you truly want affordable housing, you need affordable land, and the land's pretty expensive in Montgomery County. But if the county owns it, we can dictate the terms to the developers. So this is a crisis. I believe it's a fundamental right. If you work in this county, you should be able to afford to live in this county, and that's the kind of action that I'm going to bring as your county executive.
Mr. Elrich?
So we've already put 18 properties on the market. We've got over 90 bids for the property. Our intention is not to sell them and make money on them, but basically to make them available to affordable housing developers to do basically what David said, which is control what we get. We've got experience with this. We're doing it in Wheaton off of Veers Mill Road, where we're building 192 units. All the units will be affordable to people below $75,000 in income down to $30,000 in income. So that's important, but it's not enough. Even if I get a couple hundred units of affordable units per of each of these 18 lots, it's not going to solve a deficit of 50,000 units or meet any of the future needs. We don't do enough to require affordable housing. Our so-called vaunted MPDU program, which everybody likes to brag about, until you realize that it has 6,700 MPDUs left in the county, which is like a drop in the bucket when you think about the number of people who need affordable housing. It doesn't serve people in the lower income brackets, but it also doesn't serve people who make more than the maximum MPDU income and less than market rate. It is ironic, but in Bethesda, you need a $100,000 income to afford a market rate unit. The market rates there for a 1-bedroom start around $2,500. For a 2-bedroom, they start about $4,000. Good luck finding a 3-bedroom unit in Bethesda, and when you find it, they'll be $6,000 or $7,000. So nobody who needs affordable housing is going to get it there. We need to require a broader range of affordability. I will put forward a bill that would expand the MPDU program to include people down to $30,000 incomes and up to $100,000. And I would require a greater amount of the developments to be affordable within that range. And I'm serious, you've got to get up around 30 or 35% of all the units in order to make this work. The good news for developers is subsidizing people making $100,000 doesn't mean they have to take a haircut. But we've got to do a better job of providing. We talk about complete streets. We need to build complete communities, and that means affordable housing for everybody, and not a smattering of units followed by lots of luxury housing.
Okay. Mr. James.
Yes, we have a crisis all the time, and it's driven from developers. Our whole mindset is a plantation mindset. We supposedly solved this affordable housing thing back in 1974 when they set up the HOC. But what that does, that provides building of equity for rich people that build these units, and we've got institutionalized renting. So if we take that money instead, provide it for home ownership, everybody knows that's own a home, that after a few years it becomes more and more affordable. My daughter just moved out. She had no problem. It wasn't a crisis. She moved in with three of her friends, and they're paying $500 a month for a really nice house. So as to the extent that it's a crisis, but my wife works at Shady Grove Hospital, and a lot of the younger nurses do commute from Frederick and sometimes Hagerstown, and it is a long commute. But if we put a personal rapid transit up there, they can get to work in 20, 25 minutes. So we by extending the reach of everybody, we extend the opportunity for cheaper land. And if this transit-oriented development stuff is just packing people like cordwood, and at very expensive, like Mark said, very expensive units. There's a lot of land we can put. I would use something called AI to actually search the entire county to find the optimal places to put housing. We can look at the biggest cost of housing is interest. And there's, for 90 years, there's been a interest-free lending circle in Switzerland. We can actually, like the Habitat for Humanity, provide interest-free lending, and that'll chop the cost of housing in half.
Okay, Mr. Riemer.
Well, I want my two boys to have the opportunity to live in this county. I want all of our kids to have a chance to live in this county. And I want our empty nesters and retirees to be able to stay in this county. And that is not the trajectory that we're on. We are a housing shortage community. We're becoming like the West Coast, where the workforce has to live in entirely different jurisdictions. And your teachers can't continue to teach in your class because they've had to move to get somewhere where they can raise their growing family, because your community doesn't want to create enough townhouses and enough, normal middle class housing. Those are the issues that we're grappling with, and it's affecting people at every level of income. It's a crisis. We need a county executive who's going to spend more time being creative and making things happen, and less energy just criticizing and getting in the way and saying no. So that's why I supported the regional housing strategy. The Council of Governments came together to say we're all going to work harder to create more housing. County executive opposed that. That's why I proposed accessory dwelling units, basement apartments, and the backyard cottages. It's a great solution. It's a practical solution. County executive opposed that. That's why I supported lifting the moratorium on new housing. County executive opposed lifting that moratorium. We need creative thinking, like how do we get the bus parking lot in Shady Grove, get the buses out of there so we can build some housing there and get that community growing again. Our county executive voted against master plan after master plan, the new housing in Montgomery Village or in Silver Spring around the Purple Line or even in downtown Bethesda. Voted no, voted no, voted no. So, we recently had a debate over whether to put housing on the Chevy Chase Library site. Had to drag the county executive to get support for that idea. We still aren't there yet. We need an executive who believes that we have a problem and is going to take action. And if we don't, the path that we're on is going to lead to more homelessness, a tougher time to be here in the workforce, and fewer retirees being able to stay.
All right, you just challenged the county executive before we go to Mr. Elrich on rebuttal. Does anyone else have rebuttal that they believe they're entitled to? Mr. County Executive.
So Hans doesn't know very much about zoning and doesn't know much about county's growth policy. The county is, all the growth projections don't change with Thrive. In fact, the growth projections predate Thrive. They're based on the zone capacity of Montgomery County today and all the master plans that we did together. And most of what's in the master plan is the kind of housing you're talking about, townhouses and smaller units, because the density is concentrated in places like Bethesda and Wheaton and Silver Spring. So we had already planned for this development. We planned for it at a scale that was more likely to be developed as affordable than building high rises. High rises aren't expensive because developers are bad people. You start out with construction costs of $400, $500 a square foot. It is almost impossible to bring those down in quantity to affordability. I didn't oppose the number of things that were built. I opposed the height. I opposed the density, because if we had built more lower buildings, we would have had more affordable housing out of those lower buildings. And if the government had to subsidize units, it would have been a lot cheaper for us to subsidize it.
Okay. How do you feel that he either attacked you or that you need a rebuttal?
I need a rebuttal, yeah. County executive said I know anything about zoning.
Okay, yes.
County executive.
That would be correct.
Yeah.
1 minute.
His talk is hocus pocus. Really. What is this stuff that he's saying? It's all a disguise over his resistance and opposition to new housing. There's always a reason. Oh, it's too high. Oh, it's too dense. Oh, it's not in the right place. That's how you create a housing shortage. That's how it's done. It's textbook. That's what our county executive has been fighting for decades, to limit the amount of housing in Montgomery County. Guess what we have today? A housing shortage, and it's killing us. We've got to do something. We need leadership that gets it.
Now, I want to bring up a very important question. It's hard not to notice that all of our candidates for county executive, Democrats and Republicans, are men. Now, with the possibility that the U.S. Supreme Court may shift responsibility for abortion laws to local governments, may modify Roe versus Wade, do you feel that you as candidates have any role in protecting women's rights in Montgomery County? Mr. Elrich, please start this round of answers.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to disagree on this. We absolutely are going to protect women's rights in Montgomery County. We put $1 million into the budget to accelerate what was originally planned from state legislation for a couple of years from now. They thought the future was then, the future is now. We've got to deal with it. We have to provide additional training for nurses. We're going to have to work with doctors to be able to provide additional facilities to do abortions. Abortions do not need to be done in clinics, and they can be done in other places. We've got the ability to help facilitate doctors to find the capacity to be able to do that. I guarantee you, we are not going to cooperate with Texas and any of these other crazy places that are talking about hunting down women and prosecuting. If somebody comes here, I'm not asking them why they came here. We are never going to provide medical information. It would be a violation of HIPAA, if nothing else. And we're going to make sure people are safe. And we're going to actually go to other jurisdictions and suggest to their employers, maybe you want to move to Montgomery County, because your women employees need to be safe. You come to Montgomery County, we're racially diverse, we're committed to diversity, we respect everybody's rights, including women's rights, and including the right to choose. Your employees aren't going to have those rights in Texas. Maybe you should leave Austin and come to Montgomery County. We have more to offer.
Mr. James, you're next.
Yeah, certainly I think we're safe within our boundaries. I'd like to see some funding there, and the way we get funding is we save the $9 billion off the transportation boondoggles and open our doors to women that need to go somewhere, and maybe even provide free abortions and maybe even some transportation stipends. But the way I would do it is not through the government, is I would actually look to nonprofits and provide them funding because I think they would be much more effective at it. What I think we should have a responsibility to address is that 4 times more women of color have abortions. 5 times more women of low income have abortions. And so I would like to address those issues and solve that pressure on a woman. Do I have another kid and make my existing family suffer? And we should get the church ladies that are dead set against abortion to take responsibility on that end of things. Because sure there should be, and I have 2 daughters, and so I don't want the government to tell them what they need to do with their bodies. But I think we can also help reducing the number of abortions just by building wealth. And like I said, home ownership is one of the best ways to build generational wealth so that their kids aren't faced with the same dilemma of, do I have a growing family, or do I need to take care of the kids that I already have? I was a son of my mother was a single mom for a good number of years. She had 5 kids. She worked 3 jobs sometimes, and we had paper routes and babysat. And so I understand the pressure some of these women face, and we need to reach out and help them. And the transportation savings, we can afford to do that.
Hans Riemer, you're next.
Well, thank you. So first of all, I'd like to associate myself with the county executive's comments. His commitment to meeting the crisis with providing abortion care is one that I share. And I think, as county executive, I will be 100% dedicated to ensuring that anyone who needs care and comes to this county from outside, we will figure out how to be supportive. So let me shift the focus a little bit and just talk a little bit more pragmatically about being a parent. And I know that's a lot of moms are experiencing tremendous stress through COVID. We need a county executive who is committed to having safe in-person school, because when parents can't have their children in daycare or in school, it means many of them can't work. I have talked to so many moms who are absolutely at the end of their rope. They are saying to me, my employer doesn't value my contribution because I can't show up and my job requires me to show up. I'm afraid that my career has suffered a significant setback. We need an executive who is going to lead this community through the process and have a better reopening of schools than what we had in January or September of this year. Help our child care providers manage this more successfully than they are even now today, because women need help with their children. It's a crisis. Our parents are facing a crisis. We need more pre-K, we need more after-school programming, we need all of these resources and supports so that you can have more success and feel more confident and have a better career in this county because your children are getting their needs met.
Mr. Sullivan, as the only Republican on this panel, what is your view of the future of abortion in Montgomery County and the posture a county executive should take?
I believe that this issue was actually settled 30 years ago. I think it was called ballot question 6, and at the end of the day, it's the job of the county executive to uphold the law. So whatever the law is decided by the state of Maryland, that's my job to uphold the law. So I'm not going to engage in the hyperbole and everything's a crisis. My job, or anybody's job up here really, is to maintain and follow the law.
Mr. Blair?
So what's happening at the Supreme Court is outrageous. It's literally taking us back 50 years. And so we've got to do everything at the local level to protect women's health, to protect their right to choose. And I'm confident that we'll do that, knowing Montgomery County the way I do. We also need to be working with our state delegation to make sure that our state laws are airtight. and there's no room for misinterpretation. But when you think about Annapolis and the role that the county executive can play, it can be much broader than it is today, right? You have 32 delegates, and so it's not just about protecting women's rights or expanding access to health care. There's huge opportunities there. And I look at our 32 delegates, and I spent much time with them this past session, and they all did a good job. They brought back tens of millions of dollars here, millions of dollars there. Meanwhile, in Prince George's County, Angela Alsobrooks, she brought back $2.6 billion. $400 million along the blue line to invest near FedEx Field with an amphitheater, a civic center, a library, a market hall. And I think about what kind of investment that would be for areas like White Oak and how we could really spur that development. And so executive leadership is what we need. Because clearly we have the ideas, you heard them today. We have the talent in Montgomery County, we have the funding, but we need someone who knows how to get things done. And that's what I bring to this equation, right? And as an executive, you're setting those ambitious goals, right? Then you're making sure you have the right talent in place. You're removing the obstacles, right? You're holding people accountable, and you're getting things done. And that's the kind of leadership that I'm going to bring to Montgomery County.
All right, I don't think that there was any need for rebuttal after that. So I get a
I would like to talk about the schools.
Well, may I ask the question that I have been waiting to ask? Montgomery County Department of the Elections Department in Montgomery County is putting a very big push on early voting, the use of mail-in voting, and drop boxes. In other states, they have banned use of drop boxes or mail-in. Here's my question. Do you have confidence in this upcoming election, the Board of Elections plan? And by saying that, tell us what kind of Democrat or Republican you are. Do you believe that the 2020 presidential election was fraudulently stolen? Mr. James, starting with you, a former Republican who's become a Democrat.
Well, I wouldn't put things past anybody, but without any credible evidence. We've got every people going out and putting out these theories, but there's no hard evidence. Actually, Princeton did a study, and a company that Diebold, I guess, that the Bushes were in, they actually were able to crack the voting machine. So I wouldn't mind spending a little more money to make sure that our voting system is intact, but I think it's a moot issue.
Mr. James, and we only have a minute for answers
okay,
on this
gotcha,
one. It's kind of a lightning round.
I am confident in our electoral system. We have to be vigilant. We've had a lot of battles with the Board of Elections about the early vote locations, for example, and making sure that they're fairly distributed throughout our community so that everyone has access. But I think the great lie of significant voter fraud in 2020 is repulsive, and I fear for this country and the path that we're on, and I generally feel that we are, this country is being controlled by a minority that does not support, our democratic principles. I see my time is up.
Yeah, Mr. Sullivan, as a Republican candidate, what do you feel?
I actually wrote a letter to the Board of Elections outlining 10 points that I wanted to see changed here in Montgomery County. It had to do with the elections, basically just like there's something called a ghost voter. There's voters, if you look at the voter rolls, there are inconsistencies in the voter rolls as they exist now. We have people who addresses that are going to post office boxes or UPS spaces. And there's people who are registered twice, and I'm getting my stop sign. So,
all right, Mr. Blair.
Yes, I have confidence in the voting process, and I actually have firsthand experience. I lost to the gentleman to my right by 77 votes 4 years ago, and this is in a county with 1 million residents. And so we started looking at the various precincts, and we're looking at the votes, and we're desperately trying to find some inappropriateness, like anything. There wasn't. I would recommend and encourage you, make sure you're properly registered to vote. In the last election, we had 1,000 rejected provisional ballots. They were properly rejected, but it's people that thought they were registered and they weren't, and then their votes didn't count. So make sure you're registered properly.
And Mr. Elrich.
I have confidence that the system will work. What concerns me about, because the governor vetoed a bill, and the danger of the governor's veto is that the ballots the stuff that comes from home, the mail-in, is not going to be counted until 2 days after the election. And that means in the last election, Trump would have won, I think, on the day of the vote, but lost when all the votes were counted. And we're going to go through this madness where people are going to say, we won, we won, we won. And then 2-3 days later, it's going to be, actually, you didn't. And then it's going to be, oh my God, mail-in voter fraud.
Well, I want to thank you all, Democrats David Blair, Marc Elrich, Peter James, and Hans Riemer, and Republican Reardon Sullivan for participating. Keep your eye on MyMC Media on the web and on our other social media platforms for important information during this midterm election year. Now, we hope you as the viewers are the real winners by participating in the upcoming July 19th primary. I'm Chris Gordon. Thanks for watching.
The preceding program was provided by Montgomery Community Media, a nonprofit organization helping Montgomery County residents and their communities create and share local media content. Please visit mymcmedia.org for more information about MCM.